Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This webinar is going to be talking about building a Microsoft 365 implementation roadmap for your charity. Just before we get started, wanted to cover a little bit of housekeeping. So this session's being recorded and a copy of the slides and the video will be shared with everyone afterwards. Also, we have got Q&A box in this webinar, so please do pop your questions in and we'll have time to go through them throughout, and if not at the end. Just before I hand over, just want to quickly run through what we'll be covering today. So we've got Naveed who will be sharing an overview of the Tech for Social Impact from Microsoft. Then we'll be talking about Microsoft 365, giving a high-level overview before going into a bit of a roadmap and how we would recommend phasing Microsoft 365 implementation. We'll briefly cover some optional add-ons and also include Copilot for Microsoft 365, touch on ongoing management, and then wrap up with Q&A. So I'll pass over to Naveed now.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Much appreciated. And thank you to everyone that's taken the time to join today. Massive thanks for all the great work that you're doing in the non-profit sector. So I'm honoured to be here today to share with you more about our efforts here at Microsoft around creating a positive impact for people and the planet. But I just want to say, and I always start by saying this, I think that I've got one of the best jobs here at Microsoft. I get to work with our partners such as Chorus, but I also get to see some of the really, really good stuff that you guys are doing in the non-profit sector. So keep up the good work there, guys. Next slide, please. Okay, so at Microsoft, we believe that technology is a powerful force for empowering people and organizations. We see it every day in our work, whether it's data and AI helping predict malaria outbreaks or humanitarian organizations that are delivering digital literacy to displaced people. And we believe that the success of the non-profit and the NGO sector is critical to how we achieve our mission as a company here at Microsoft. But to do this, we must make the most of best world-class technology accessible, relevant, and for non-profits, NGOs, and IGOs. So as a customer-first, partner-led company, we always start with the needs of our customers, and we work with our partners, such as Chorus, to make sure we're delivering the best outcomes for each organization. Next slide, please. So the world has changed so much in profound and fundamental ways. We've seen the role of technology have a positive impact as we've all tried to survive through this global pandemic. And the level of technology adoption has also rapidly accelerated. So as we think about that pace of transformation, we also have to understand the consequences of that transformation, as well as what our role in that transformation is. Next slide, please. So we see a digital divide and opportunity continuing to grow, but many people are left behind. So the number of children in sub-Saharan Africa that are literate at the age of 10, so that's when you stop learning to read and you read to learn, is 10%. So that's 90% of children can't read in sub-Saharan Africa. And that means they can't get a job. The economic opportunity gap is growing, and COVID had an impact, and technology has a role to play there. We also look at the fundamental rights issues. We see tragic and unlawful wars unfolding, and we see human rights today and every day on the news that are being violated all across the world, and technology has a massive role to play there. We also see an urgent climate crisis. So in 2021, at the end of June, it was 106 degrees in Seattle. I believe that we've also had the hottest January on record. And in Netherlands, it was also baking at that time. So that's not normal. There's a role for technology, to play in supporting the world to become a cooler and better place. And then there's this diminishing trust in big technology. There's always questions about our motives, our motivations, but it's critical that we apply technology and innovations to address these challenges without sacrificing our core values, such as trust, privacy, transparency, and inclusion. Next slide, please. So we realized we needed to evolve and think about a different business model role in supporting societal changes and organizations and non-profits that serve this purpose. So in 2017, Microsoft Philanthropies brought its contribution efforts together with commercial sales and business development to create Tech for Social Impact. So we created Tech for Social Impact to empower every non-profit and humanitarian organization to accelerate social good. So as we work to help everyone achieve more, we are committed to sharing our learning and reporting our progress across a variety of societal causes, such as affordable housing, digital skilling, and climate change, just to name a few. So to give you a couple of examples, Microsoft has reduced 21 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by our top suppliers. And each month we analyze over 470 billion emails for malware and phishing attempts. TSI combines our grants with non-profit commercial engagement in a single team to accelerate impact through technology, deliver solutions to empower social breakthroughs, and help accelerate Microsoft's philanthropic efforts through our efforts and those of our partners. So globally, non-profits received 1.9 billion in donated or discounted technology and services. So we don't only provide technology grants, we also reinvest any profits that are made from discounted sales to larger charities back in the sector to help the smaller ones. We give free software to those with 10 or fewer employees, which makes up about 80% of the world's 4 million non-profit organizations. And we help non-profits modify Microsoft software to help with their specific needs, such as fundraising and mobilizing volunteers, in part connecting them with willing helpers in the company's global partner ecosystem. And we also offer free digital skills training. So as of March 2021, 30 million learners were reached as part of our global skills initiative. So we're committed to helping in the following ways. Affordable technology solutions. So TSI also works closely with non-profits to create purpose-built solutions on technologies across our product stacks. We're committed to helping non-profits get access to best practices, reference architectures, and faster data insights. And then we have capacity building. So just delivering technology isn't the whole answer. In TSI, we recognize that capacity building is often the key to successful adoption of new technology. That's why we're committed to helping thousands of organizations get access and training and certifications to improve their digital skills. The Microsoft partner ecosystem. So we leverage tens of thousands of our commercial customers, such as Chorus, to create a healthy ecosystem of partners dedicated to delivering solutions and services designed specifically for the non-profit sector. And then lastly, we have the social investment model. So incremental funds after costs covered go back into the team and charitable contributions. Next slide, please. So the work that we do in TSI and the broader philanthropies organizations is perhaps some of the best and most powerful work in bringing these pillars to life. The Tech for Social Impact team is truly committed to this sector and to the idea that it's absolutely core to Microsoft's mission to empower every non-profit and international development organization with Microsoft technology to accelerate social good. And we've got many examples of how we directly impact Microsoft societal pillars. Let's just take a look at a couple here now. Next slide, please. So our partnership with UNICEF is a great example of how we directly support inclusive economic growth. So as I mentioned a couple of slides ago, 10% of children aged 10 in sub-Saharan Africa can read and 90% cannot. And UNICEF terms this gap learning poverty. If you can't read, it's very hard to learn, which in turn impacts your economic prospects. So through our partnership with Passport Partnership, we've deployed community training to assist with this crisis in 23 countries, and 20 more are currently in progress. Millions of kids are registered and nearly 300,000 have completed training. And some of the hardest reached locations are adopting the fastest. The two biggest adopters at the moment, with tens of thousands of kids learning, are Laos and Somalia. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then when we look at our impact in committing to a sustainable future, who's helping us there? The National Forest Foundation is a non-profit that works to preserve and protect wildlife habitat and forestry across 193 million acres of national forest system. So in partnership with Threshold World, the National Forest Foundation was able to implement Microsoft Cloud and non-profit solutions. Now they're able to track donor dollars, quantify the impact of their work, and further their mission of environmental restoration and conservation. So each dollar that's raised translates directly to another tree planted or preserved. Next slide, please. And then how do we protect fundamental rights? United Kingdom-based nonprofit Barnardos connects hundreds of thousands of families and children in need with valuable social services each year. Barnardos is especially passionate about protecting the fundamental rights, safety and health of children. And to best make those connections, Barnardos must ensure that employees have the technology they need to work effectively and accurately. And the organisation also needs to show potential donors that the work that they're doing has a concrete impact. So by deploying Microsoft Cloud technologies and Surface devices, Barnardos has helped employees be more effective in the field, and it has gained valuable reporting capabilities that have been essential in securing funding to meet the increased demand for services, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. Slide, please. So I sort of touched on earlier, there's a number of non-profits that are available from Microsoft. I would urge you to take advantage of these offers straight off the bat. Speak to Chorus. If you don't know if you're registered as a non-profit tenant, they can support you in doing that. They can also advise you on any sort of issues that you may have. They can liaise directly with the Microsoft Tech for Social Impact team. But I would urge each and every one of you non-profits, if you're not registered a non-profit, please take advantage of these offers. Next slide, please. So supporting non-profits is part of who we are. It's in our DNA here at Microsoft Tech for Social Impact. We've been engaged with charities since 1983, since the inception of our employee giving campaign. But our work has only just begun. This year marks Tech for Social Impact's 7th year anniversary, and we're more motivated than ever. And truly reaching our vision at real scale requires a broad base of amazing teammates like you guys in every corner of the globe. So in 2022, we provided 3.8 billion in grants and discounted software and services, and we equipped 325,000 non-profit organizations with modern, secure, and scalable cloud solutions. And then in July 2020, we launched an initiative to help 25 million people worldwide acquire the digital skills needed in a COVID-19 economy. So everything that we do is driven by this deep sense of purpose and timeless values of trust, privacy, transparency, and inclusion. And that's the values our customers have come to expect of us, and today's fast-changing society requires of us. Slide, please. So the question really is, what is our role in modern day society? So Milton Friedman, who's a renowned economist, he said that the role of a company is to serve its shareholders, that greed is good. But the definition has evolved because it turns out that companies don't operate in some parallel universe or vacuum outside of the planet. We're affected by the world around us. Whether it's global warming, it's poverty, or it's our next market in Africa, billions and billions of people in our world are affected. So the new definition of what a company needs to do, that's every company, came from the Business Roundtable, which is 181 CEOs, and they come together and they say, the role of a company is not just to serve its shareholders, but the role of a company is to serve its stakeholders. And our stakeholders are our employees, our partners, such as Chorus, and most importantly, our customers, you guys. That's the communities that we operate in. And the philosophy here at Microsoft Tech for Social Impact is pretty simple. Companies that can do more, they should do more. And we believe with our partners, we are doing more. So with that, I would like to thank all of you again for taking the time to join the webinar today. And I'll pass you back to Lisa. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Naveed. Just before I pass you on to our consultants, I just wanted to give a brief introduction to Chorus for those that aren't aware. So we are Microsoft specialists based in the UK, and we work across Microsoft's 3 major clouds, so Azure, Microsoft 365 and Dynamics 365, and we've got the badges to show for it. So I just want to introduce our speakers who will be talking through the Microsoft 365 roadmap. We've got Joe Cato, who is our Principal Engineer for Cloud, and Jason Lee, who is our Collaboration and Information Management Lead. Joe's going to be covering more of the productivity and security elements of Microsoft 365, whereas Jason's more focused on the compliance, data protection and governance features. So over to you, Joe.
Cool. Thanks for that, Lisa. So we'll start on the Microsoft 365 roadmap, and we'll start off with essentially what is Microsoft 365, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So pretty confident that everyone here is familiar with Office 365, but just in case you're not, to clarify, it's the productivity platform from Microsoft that provides you the workloads such as Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Teams, and OneDrive. Microsoft 365 is essentially a combination of Office 365, Windows 10/11 licensing, and also Microsoft's Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, also known as EMS. EMS offers you the security and device management capabilities in the form of Entra ID Plan 1, Intune, and some other items. Microsoft 365 is a great product offering for Microsoft, and it's a fantastic tool to allow you to achieve more securely and from anywhere, but it is just that, it's a product, and simply buying the product doesn't mean you're getting the most out of it. Some of the common conversations we have with customers is that they've been recommended to purchase Microsoft 365 and they've done so, but don't really know what it offers. They don't understand what security and compliance features it can bring, in addition to the known productivity features. And then once they do understand, it's a bit of a question of, where do I start? Lastly, the licensing model for charities will soon come under the New Commerce Experience, or NCE, meaning there's an increased requirement for you to achieve value for money. So our approach to Microsoft 365 transition is split into the 3 phases that you can see here. Customers generally transition from fundamental to optimal over time, and in doing so, you increase the security, productivity, and compliance capabilities of your organization. It starts with proof of concepts, or POCs. Proof of concepts are great because they allow you to test, provide feedback on features on a small scale, and also don't represent a significant cost to deliver. This all reduces the risks and avoids a bit of a big bang approach. Phase 2 is then a mixture of org-wide migrations of the items that we successfully demonstrated in those proof of concepts, and then proof of concepts of the more advanced security and compliance features. Then lastly, phase 3 is the rollout of those advanced security and compliance features. So here we can see at a high level our suggested roadmap. So organizations typically start at the lower end of this roadmap, and over time, the technical maturity and adoption of Microsoft 365 increases. A lot of the more advanced features at the top of the roadmap rely on more foundational aspects, and a good example of this is the compliance items. So Office 365 DLP, or data loss prevention, is quite difficult to implement if the data isn't located in a Microsoft 365 workload, such as SharePoint, Exchange, or Teams.
I definitely echo that. There's some definite benefits in bringing everything under the Microsoft 365 umbrella, get all your content into SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, so that you can manage it in a consistent way.
Yeah. Cool. And here we've essentially applied those 3 recommended phases to the roadmap. We'll refer to this slide as we explain each phase. This can serve as a general guide of what order each item should be implemented in. Fundamental, as mentioned previously, is proof of concepts of migrating your data to Microsoft 365 workloads, and also ensuring that those identities are protected from day one with things like MFA, conditional access. Lastly, it's also worth calling out the starter leaver process to ensure you have governance wrapped around it. I'm sure Jason's got a few words on that, and he runs across this quite a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely worth nailing down those lever processes early. Once you start thinking about bringing content into OneDrive for Business, bringing content into SharePoint, letting users create teams and SharePoint sites, you really need to have a plan for what happens to that content when those users move on.
Perfect. So in this phase, we're essentially performing proof of concepts of these things you see on screen. The proof of concepts give you the knowledge that the feature is suitable, and also gives you trust that the migration or deployment process works. And this is where most organizations generally are. Identity is now this new security perimeter, and therefore it's crucial that you start to migrate to Microsoft 365, but you do so by ensuring that your identities are secured at the same time. So having that foundational level for security, which many organizations still don't have, is really, really important. So some examples of where you may find yourself at the moment. So with Exchange, with email, you might be using on-premises Exchange. You might also be using a hosted Exchange system by a third party, or you may also be using another provider such as Google Workspace. And so the natural migration path here is to Exchange Online. User data, so that's data that's worked on by a single individual and either doesn't need to be shared with a wider team or is not yet ready to be shared with a wider team, is generally stored in a desktop documents folder, and that's then usually redirected to a file server, or it could also be stored on a home drive that you can only access if you're in the office or when you're on the VPN. And so the suggested migration path here is to OneDrive. With OneDrive, you get 1 terabyte of storage for each person, built-in version control, and also access from any device. Moving on to shared data, so that's data that's worked on by multiple individuals or as a bit of a central repository for data for a given department or team. Generally, you achieve that using a file server, and you connect your workstations to that as in map network drives. That could be things like a G drive, a H drive, or anything like that. The migration path here is to SharePoint and or Teams, depending on the data. In terms of the desktop applications, you might be using Office 2016, Office 2019, Office 2022, or you might just have a bit of inconsistency across the organization. Within the Microsoft 365 licensing, you receive access to the Microsoft 365 apps, and these apps are constantly updated by Microsoft with new features. So it's important that you factor in a proof of concept of rolling out these apps. It's also important to note that whenever Microsoft release new features for Office 365 and Microsoft 365, they will assume that you're using the Microsoft 365 apps. In terms of collaboration capabilities, you may have little or no real collaboration capabilities, or you might be using third-party solutions, so maybe Cisco WebEx, maybe Zoom. Teams provides a great collaboration experience. We're all collaborating right now on this webinar, and it's included in most of your Microsoft 365 licenses. In terms of identity protection, I mentioned previously that identity is a security perimeter. You might currently have MFA in certain systems, maybe it's only used for administrators. It's really important we get that in place as soon as we can, and we can do that through integrating those applications with Entra, used to be called Azure AD, and then using conditional access to enforce MFA and other security controls. In terms of your on-premises identity platform, that's generally Active Directory. You might not have much in the way of monitoring for that, and therefore we recommend you use Microsoft Defender for Identity, and that provides a lot of information by essentially you install a sensor on each of your domain controllers, and those sensors monitor for malicious behavior and can then raise it for investigation either by your internal or outsourced cybersecurity operations center or CSOC. In terms of endpoint protection, you might not have a very standardized endpoint protection at the moment, or you could be using competing vendors, so things like Sophos or McAfee. With Microsoft 365, you can receive Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which is a Gartner leading application, and it provides so many features. We could probably do a webinar just on that, so I won't go too much into that, but essentially it integrates extremely well with the rest of the Microsoft 365 Defender suite and also Microsoft Sentinel for that holistic view across all of your devices. And then, as Jason and I touched on earlier, you might currently have an IT managed start or leave process. Maybe it focuses purely on removing access rather than actually thinking about what the organization's data access and retention requirements are. So it's important that you start to consider how you manage data within Microsoft 365, particularly with leavers. Data is no longer retained indefinitely, so you need to think about how you need to update your processes to align with the way that Microsoft 365 works.
So where would you start if this was a complete greenfield deployment? You're starting from scratch. Which of these things would you do first?
I do two at the beginning. Essentially, I would start to move mail to Exchange Online, but at the same time, email is a commonly attacked platform. There's lots of legacy authentication protocols in place, things like POP, IMAP, things that don't support MFA. So it's important that we get that locked down immediately and also get MFA in place. The last thing that you want is to be quite far along in your Microsoft 365 adoption and then have to go through and get MFA put in place. It can be quite resistant from certain users, so it's important to get that in early for both a security point of view, but also ensuring that the staff are used to it as soon as they can be.
Sounds good to me.
So we'll now move on to the advanced phase, which comprises of those org-wide migrations of the items that we were doing proof of concepts for, followed by some security and productivity items. It also includes some compliance features. So a good example of that is using Microsoft Information Protection to apply classification labels to sites and teams. At this stage, we're starting to reduce those on-premises workloads by utilizing the equivalent cloud workload in Microsoft 365, and those org-wide migrations are in place. We're also starting proof of concepts for some of the more advanced items, and some key callouts for that being Intune. So firstly, Intune has two key capabilities. We've got MAM and MDM. So MAM is mobile application management, and it focuses on mobile phones, so iOS and Android devices, but it's used quite commonly in situations where the device is not owned by the organization, it's owned by the user. There's always a gray area where you want to make sure that you're applying controls to the device, but you also don't want to overextend those controls. Last thing you want is to wipe a device when someone leaves and then end up wiping all their pictures and all their text messages. So mobile application management is great because it applies controls at the app level for the Microsoft 365 apps, things like Teams, Outlook, SharePoint. And you can require certain controls from an IT perspective. So you can make sure that devices on the latest operating system. You can also limit things like copy paste between the applications or outside of a managed application. And lastly, if someone does leave, you can wipe the app, but it's only wiping the app. It's not wiping the device itself. So any personal data is retained on the device. On the other side of that coin, you've got MDM, so mobile device management, and that focuses on fully managed devices. So typically devices that are owned by the organization and intended for work use only. This could be phones, it could also be your Windows devices, your Mac devices as well. But essentially the key difference is the IT and the organization can apply as many controls as the operating system allows, and the device can be fully wiped remotely. Intune can then be used with Windows Autopilot. So for those that aren't aware, Windows Autopilot is a great device provisioning experience. So the process is that you purchase a device and you send it to the user. The user unboxes it and signs in. The device then essentially self-provisions itself. They see a little screen which tells them how far along the process is getting. And what's happening in the background is all of your required applications and device configuration profiles are installed. So apps like Office, Edge, anything else you may need are installed before the user gets to the desktop. And policies, maybe you require a BitLocker disk encryption, maybe you've got an organization screensaver, those are applied as well. You can also apply compliance policies, and essentially what that does is it checks if the device meets certain requirements. So is it got BitLocker? Has it got secure boot? Is Defender onboarded? And if it's not compliant, then you can start to leverage that with conditional access to maybe restrict or entirely block access to Microsoft 365. So you make sure that you can only access your data from those compliant devices.
Can you tell us a bit about passwordless? How do we get rid of passwords?
Yes, so Microsoft are very close to releasing passkeys. I think it was originally going to be out in January, but it got pushed back a little bit. It's now looking around about March time, so we're essentially waiting to see when it all comes out. So I won't touch on that yet, just because we haven't got all the details of that yet. So I'll touch on what's available right now. And the two main methods are the Microsoft Authenticator app and also Windows Hello for Business. So Microsoft Authenticator, you may be familiar with this already. It's commonly used as MFA method, and essentially you sign in, you type in your password, and you get a push notification, and you may also be required to choose a number that matches. The Microsoft Authenticator app can also provide passwordless, and on the app itself, it's called Phone Sign-In, and it changes the sign-in experience. So instead of typing email address, password, MFA prompt, you type in your email address, and then you immediately get a number on the screen. You then open up the app. You get the same number on the screen with some other numbers, and you have to choose a number that matches. Then you need to complete any kind of authentication for the device. So it could be Face ID, Touch ID, PIN. And then once that's done, you're signed in. There's no need for a password. So that's really, really good for users who maybe don't use Windows devices, or if they do use Windows devices, maybe for some reason they're not compatible with Windows Hello. On Windows Hello, as the name implies, only available on Windows devices. And essentially it's similar. So you use a biometric device, assuming the device supports it. Again, face, fingerprint. You can also use a PIN. A PIN is stronger than a password still. So even if your devices don't support the biometrics, you should still look to use PINs. But Windows Hello integrates with the device's Trusted Platform module, or TPM, to keep those secrets secure. And also, once someone has signed in with Windows Hello, they'll automatically be signed into any Microsoft 365 workloads on their device because they've already completed that MFA process. There's some benefits as well from a user side as well as an IT side for going passwordless. So the obvious one for a user is they no longer need to remember a password. They no longer need to change it on a certain frequency. And they also no longer need to contact IT to spend time, waste time essentially getting their password reset. For IT, naturally, IT don't have to reset those passwords, which means there's more time that can be freed up for those agents to do more important items. And also identities, I mentioned previously, is the security perimeter. By using passwordless, they're significantly stronger.
Thanks, Joe. That's really good. We're also starting to see some of the compliance tools come in at this phase. And this is really about starting to differentiate how you manage different types of content. So we've got a few examples on here. MPIP, if you see it on the slides, is Microsoft Purview Information Protection. This used to be Microsoft Information Protection. Before that, it was AIP as your information protection. So it's gone through a few renames. Site and team classification. This is about having your business users, your organization users, choose a sensitivity classification when they create a new SharePoint site or a new team in Microsoft Teams. So your sensitivity classifications will be unique to you. It's usually things like general, confidential, highly sensitive, and so on. Now, depending on what sensitivity your user chooses, we're going to put different controls in place. So if my user creates a team and they classify it as general, we might say, great, we'll allow external access will allow them to invite people from outside the organization to collaborate, will allow them to access that team from any device. If they've labeled it as highly sensitive, we might be far more restrictive. We might say, okay, we're not going to allow any guest users in this space, and we're going to insist that you access from a managed device, so from one of the devices that you've enrolled in Intune. So it's giving us that ability to apply graded controls rather than locking everything down, to apply a bit of nuance. Similar idea for file and email protection. This is about when you send an email or save a file, being prompted to set the classification. So you're choosing, okay, is my email general, confidential, highly sensitive? And depending on what I choose, we can put different requirements, restrictions in place. That might include some headers and footers, just stating what the handling policy is. It might also include some rights management. We might have a label that says confidential HR only. That means that wherever that file goes, it can only be viewed by members of the HR team, and that's enforced through Entra, through Microsoft 365. Information lifecycle management is another really important one. So since GDPR came out, which I think was around about 2016, we're all realizing we can't keep everything forever. Data storage is getting increasingly expensive as well. So managing the life cycle of your content is increasingly important. You're going to have some content, possibly financials, that you need to keep for a set number of years. You'll have other content, usually personally identifiable information, that you're obliged to delete, usually quite quickly, possibly within 6 months. So we can set up retention labels and retention policies that let you streamline the management of life cycles, so that basically you apply a label or you have a default label in a location, and that life cycle is managed automatically. Things are either protected from deletion, or at the end of a fixed period, they're deleted automatically. It's a really useful capability there. Last one to call out on this slide is probably guest access reviews. So being able to invite external users into SharePoint sites or into Teams to collaborate with them is really powerful. It's a really effective way of collaborating. It's far better than sending files backwards and forwards via email. You're all in the same space, you're all looking at the same versions of the files. It's brilliant. The risk is once you've invited a guest user, it's easy to forget they're there. And 2 years later, you look at a SharePoint site, you see, okay, we've still got a bunch of guest users here that no one is familiar with. So guest access reviews is about setting up on a schedule, having the owners of these teams, these SharePoint sites, go through a review process. And it's a really streamlined process. They're guided to just approve or reject continued access for all of the guest users in each of their teams. And that helps to just make sure that those guest access requirements are genuine and ongoing.
Okay. So we're starting to now move on to the optimal stage, and at this point the advanced phase is complete, and you're generally ahead of most organizations in terms of that technical maturity. As you can see, the items on here are now very focused on the compliance platform and some other elements that may or may not be suitable for you depending on your organization. So some examples of that are application proxy or Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. But as you start to near the top of the roadmap, your attention should start to turn from migration and deployment to the ongoing management and usage of the security compliance data. So some examples of the advanced features that will be start getting deployed out at this phase are using device risk, which comes from Defender for Endpoint. Essentially, Defender for Endpoint will constantly monitor device risk state. So what applications you have installed, are those applications vulnerable to any known vulnerabilities, and other items like that. Is it poorly configured? Is there not a very strong password on the device? Things like that. And those all contribute to the device's overall risk level, which you can then use within compliance within Intune. So you can say in Intune, if a device is above medium on the risk level, then mark it as non-compliance. And as I mentioned earlier, you can then leverage conditional access to restrict or block access to your data. You can also start to automate some of your business processes using Power Apps, Power Automate, and generally the Power Platform. This generally focuses on things like digitizing forms. You could also start to look at Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365, as I mentioned just now. They're great solutions for virtual desktops for any seasonal or temporary workers. They also work quite well in any mergers and acquisitions, because the trouble with mergers and acquisitions is you often need to deploy a large number of devices at a very short period of time. Providing that cloud PC can help smooth that process over. And then lastly for me is the Microsoft Sentinel. So using Sentinel, ingesting all of the different data sources from Microsoft 365 into Sentinel, and then having your internal or outsourced CSOC provide those detection and response capabilities to you.
So you can see that the compliance platform is starting to be really heavily represented at this stage. The reason why it's largely concentrated in the optimal phase is because it builds on your technical maturity in other areas. So I'll call out a few of these. Let's start with Office 365 DLP. So DLP stands for Data Loss Prevention, sometimes Data Leak Prevention. And it's a really powerful tool. It's about creating policies that detect when sensitive or confidential information is being shared in an inappropriate way. And in most cases, that means someone's sending it out of the organization to someone external. It could also be inappropriate sharing within an organization. The way this works, the most basic level, is it's looking for patterns. So it's looking for predictable patterns that indicate financial data. It might be looking for indications of personal data like national insurance numbers, passport numbers. And when it sees these patterns, it can do various things, from raising alerts to showing policy tips that say to the user, hey, it looks like you're about to send an email containing sensitive information. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Right up to fully blocking that sharing altogether. The reason why this is in the optimal phase is because it's something that needs to be deployed quite carefully. Because it's relying on pattern matching, you can't really just turn it on and hope that it does what you want it to do. You need to test it and monitor it and tune it over a long period, basically to make sure that you're not blocking genuine business activity. The usual horror story with DLP is people turn it on in a rush, block the managing director from sending an email, and it gets turned off again very sharply. So it's something that does need to be planned, needs to be tested in monitoring only mode, and then turned on progressively. We've also got endpoint DLP on here. So this is about extending that DLP protection to your managed devices. So for example, stopping people pasting confidential information into ChatGPT, for example, or stopping them from uploading sensitive files to third-party cloud platforms. We've also got insider risk management on here. This is a really powerful tool. It's built on the idea of combining signals from multiple sources. So imagine you've got signals coming in from lots of different business apps. You might have signals coming from SharePoint telling you that a user's downloading an unusual number of files. You might have a signal coming from your HR app that tells you these users have handed in a notice. You might have signals coming from your physical badging software telling you that users are accessing particular secure areas of your building. All of these signals on their own are probably pretty meaningless, but when they occur together, they can be indicators of potential problems, so things like data theft, data leaks. And insider risk management is really designed, it's aimed at those kind of scenarios, detecting those potential problems, and then guiding you through a triage process where you can look into them, say, okay, everything's fine, or no, we've got a potential problem here, let's escalate it. On the MPIP side of things, this is about moving from manual classification to automated classification. So rather than having your users classify every file based on sensitivity manually, you do it automatically. The reason why you do this later in the process, same reason you deploy DLP later in the process, you're relying on pattern matching, you're relying on automation. You need to be very sure that you know what it's doing, that it's doing exactly what you want it to before you start relying on it.
So we'll now touch on a few of the optional add-ons that you can bundle with Microsoft 365. None of these are must-haves in any way, but they do mean you might be able to remove any competing third-party solutions with a Microsoft solution. These are add-ons though, so do remember that because of that, they're not included in any license, any Microsoft 365 license. They'll have their own costs. So I won't go through these in detail. We want to leave some time for you guys to ask questions, but just to quickly touch on the items within Intune Suite. Intune Suite is a new product offering from Microsoft, and it bundles a number of additional items. So Remote Help essentially provides that desktop support to your users. Endpoint Privilege Management helps elevate applications that need to run with admin rights. Cloud PKI can replace your on-premises PKI infrastructure, issuing certificates to devices. Enterprise App Management is essentially a replacement for alternatives like Scatman or Patch IPC to provide third-party patch management. And then there's some other things like Advanced Analytics, being able to pull battery health status from devices, management of AR and VR devices, and also Microsoft Tunnel, which is a per-app VPN for MAM devices. Oh, you're on mute, Jason. Classic.
Well spotted. Right, I'll keep this brief. Syntex and SharePoint Premium, they are actually the same thing. Microsoft are in the process of renaming Syntex as SharePoint Premium, but it's not quite there yet, so both terms are still active. Basically, this is something to look at once you've got all your content into SharePoint, you've got a sound information architecture. This is basically a set of pay-as-you-go capabilities to do some smarter, more automated things with that content. So you can do things like content assembly, which is about automating creation of repetitive documents. So if you create proposals in a very structured way by combining, plugging data into a standardized template, you can automate that with content assembly. There's also some really useful AI capabilities here. So document processing, this is about having machine learning models extract key information from unstructured files. So let's say you've got a bunch of invoices in SharePoint, they're unstructured documents, it might be PDFs, it could even be image files. This is about having that AI pull out the useful information, so the amount, the payee, the due date, the customer, and so on. There's lots of automating tagging capabilities. So if you're managing an image library, you can have some AI tagging going on. So the algorithm will basically tag your images with keywords, making those searchable so you can find relevant images more easily. And you've also got some useful OCR, optical character recognition capabilities in there. So that's if you've got files that are scans of printed text or handwritten text, the OCR can make sense of that, can make that text searchable, indexable, so that you can find it, refer to it, use it in AI solutions and so on. Viva is another set of add-ons. This is a collection of add-ons centered around employee experience. So they are fairly disparate. No one sets out to deploy Viva as one project. You usually look at specific Viva building blocks for specific projects. So things like Viva Connections and Viva Amplify are really useful if you're looking at internal communications. So Connections helps you consolidate everything into Teams, helps you bring your SharePoint intranet and an employee dashboard into Teams. Amplify is really useful at streamlining those internal communications, so organizing campaigns, organizing multi-channel communications. So you've got content going out by email, by Teams, by posts in SharePoint, posts in Viva Engage. Lots of tools here to help you reach and understand your employees as well. So things like Viva Pulse, Viva Glint, Viva Insights are all about really understanding working patterns and getting some feedback from your users. Okay, Copilot is obviously a huge topic of conversation at the moment. We'll touch on it very briefly here. We are covering this with other upcoming webinars. On the productivity side of things, you've basically got three core Copilot offerings. You've got the free version of Copilot, which is aimed at absolutely everyone. This is what you'll get if you browse to copilot.microsoft.com, or if you click that Copilot icon on your Windows 11 taskbar, or if you use Bing as well, you'll have seen this this pop up in the sidebar. This is basically giving you a safe version of ChatGPT. So it's giving you the same AI models, so GPT-4, GPT-4 Turbo, but with data protection as well. So long as you're signed in with your Microsoft 365 account, Microsoft are guaranteeing your data protection. So if you're looking for a secure generative AI solution that you can use for free, it's Microsoft Copilot is the one to use. Copilot Pro, despite the name, this is actually aimed at private individuals. So if you're using personal or family versions of Microsoft 365, you can get Copilot Pro and use Copilot within Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, and so on at home. The one we're really interested in is Copilot for Microsoft 365. So this is about bringing AI, generative AI, into your day-to-day work environments. So into Teams, into Outlook, into all of your Office apps. Really useful for things like summarizing meetings. If you have transcription on in your Teams meetings, you can have Copilot summarize that meeting for you, give you the key action points. You can have it summarize long email threads. You can have it create executive summaries for you in Word documents and so on. From a sort of data governance point of view, we do recommend that you make sure that you've got some reasonably robust data governance in place first of all. Copilot can obviously only access content when it's accessible through Microsoft 365. So migrating file shares into SharePoint Online, for example, is going to increase the capabilities of what Copilot can do for you. But putting decent information lifecycle management in place is also quite important, so that when you ask Copilot for information, you know that it's giving you up-to-date, accurate information, and it's not exposing things that you don't want it to expose. Okay, Joe, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So throughout this webinar, we've referred to quite a well-defined migration path, but it is just a recommended approach. It's no way prescriptive. Most migrations are tailored to the organization, and some examples of when this may happen are if you've got certain third-party products that you'd like to replace with a Microsoft 365 alternative, and maybe the license renewal for it is coming up sooner. So a common one we come across is endpoint protection software. So our customers may be using Sophos, McAfee, things I've mentioned previously. Maybe that's coming up in 3 to 6 months, and you want to prioritize that sooner than possibly moving mail or data to OneDrive and so on and so forth. And so the roadmap is tailored to that. We've also assumed that the E5 is used in this case in Microsoft 365 E5, but not every organization has that because it is the most expensive option. So again, the roadmap is tailored to the licensing that you have. And I mentioned earlier, once implemented, you'll need to start looking at how you manage and look after Microsoft 365. You need individual teams or to manage the security aspects, usually in the form of a CSOC, but also to keep on top of the ever-evolving nature of Microsoft 365 to see what new horizons are coming out and how they might impact your organization. So your teams can achieve this using things like the Microsoft 365 Message Center within the Admin Center, and also the Microsoft Tech Community Forums. And Jason, data protection and compliance is an ongoing item, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. It's important here. So over time, your organizations are going to change. They're going to evolve. The types of information you're storing are going to change. Your user base is going to change. With things like DLP, it's quite important to have some ongoing monitoring and tuning just to make sure that it's still doing what you want it to. It's still meeting your regulatory requirements. It's still matching what you want it to match. Your false positive rate isn't creeping upwards and so on.
Perfect.
Amazing, thanks both. Just before we wrap up and head on to questions, we just wanted to share a few resources that could be useful. So these will be sent to everyone after the event. So there's links to Microsoft documentation guides, also a Microsoft 365 licensing map, and also training guides, which have loads of useful training resources from Microsoft that are free and great to share with employees. We also can offer a Microsoft 365 assessment. So if you would like a review of your current licensing or setup, or would like support building out a roadmap, please do reach out to us after the event. So I just want to now take over to any questions. Which, just having a little look, we have got some through. So if anyone has any questions, do pop them into the Q&A chat box. One from a little while ago, what are some good examples of things that you can do with Power Automate?
Okay, I'll handle that. Power Automate is really good at bridging gaps between systems. So Power Automate works by connecting to different systems. So it could say connect to your email, it can connect to your SharePoint sites, it can connect to file shares through data connectors. So a good example would be, let's say you've got a whole bunch of invoices piling into a shared mailbox. You might have like a purchase ledger mailbox. You could use Power Automate or Azure Logic Apps to pull out those invoices and push them into a SharePoint site where someone can work through them in a structured way. It's also really useful in SharePoint for any kind of process automation around content. So if you've got publishing processes, approval processes on documentation, if you've got business authority processes where spending requests need to go through various stages of approval depending on the amounts, Power Automate's really a useful way of tackling all of those. It's also the recommended migration path for any native SharePoint workflows that you've still got running. So the last native SharePoint workflow model in SharePoint Online is due to reach end of life in April 2026. So those native SharePoint workflows, we do recommend that they're moved to Power Automate or Azure Logic Apps.
Amazing, cheers, Jason. A few others. I'm interested to know more about using Azure Virtual Desktop for seasonal workers, as we have a large number of these in our charity. Probably one for you, Joe.
Yeah, so AVD Azure Virtual Desktop is great for that. So you manage the virtual machine. So essentially, with your licensing, so let's assume you've got Business Premium or higher. The operating system licensing, if it's Windows 10 or Windows 11 VMs, is free. So you don't pay for that. Essentially, you pay for the compute cost and the storage cost of the VM. But because it's your VMs, you can turn them off and turn them back on as and when you need. So a good example of a way that organizations save cost is you can have AVD automatically start the virtual machine when someone tries to connect, and then you can do some automation in Azure to turn it off. Maybe you run it from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you're not paying for it, you're not getting charged for it, you're getting paid for the storage. So it's really good for that, especially for scaling up, because you could just use the elasticity of Azure to increase the number of VMs you have, scale them up, scale them out as much as you need to, and then scale it back down again as and when you need to. If you want to have more of a chat with it, let us know, and we can have a call to go for a bit more of your specific requirements, Liz.
Amazing. Got two on Copilot as well. So at which point along the roadmap should Copilot be introduced? And also one that's fairly similar, what are the recommended minimum compliance capabilities needed in order to roll out Copilot for M365?
Okay, so good questions. So in terms of actually using Copilot, any Microsoft 365 license will qualify. So you need a Microsoft 365 business or enterprise license or charity license as a starting point. You want to make sure that all your users are using Teams, using Outlook for desktop, and using the subscription versions of the Office apps. In terms of where you should be in compliance, that's really down to your own appetite for risk. I would say as a starting point, you want to make sure that your content is in SharePoint. So get your file content into OneDrive for Business, into SharePoint. First of all, that's probably the other prerequisite to get a sort of decent return on investment from Copilot. In terms of compliance, it's really more down to your level of comfort with your compliance posture. So Copilot isn't going to give users answers from any data that they don't have access to. So it's going to respect security within your Microsoft 365 environment. What it may do, however, is shine a light on where your security, where your access management isn't quite as tight as it should be. It may shine a light on bad security, but it's not going to cause bad security. Of the compliance capabilities, I would say lifecycle management is probably going to be the most important. If you're worried about what Copilot is going to draw on when it answers a question, having decent lifecycle management in place so that stale, out of date, potentially the litigious content isn't hanging around for longer than it should be, that's really going to stand you in good stead. The other compliance tools do complement Copilot, but possibly less directly. So classification is reasonably important. If you ask Copilot to generate a document and it draws on some source content and that source content is classified, Copilot will respect that classification. It will stay within the constraints of that classification. And if it draws on a document labeled confidential to create a new document, it will label that new document as confidential as well. There's really no baseline requirement. It's more down to your risk appetite and your confidence in how robust your access management is. One of the things I think's probably often overlooked is information architecture in SharePoint. So if you've got granular, well-managed SharePoint sites, it's going to be much easier to opt those sites in or out of Copilot. It's going to be much easier to manage access requirements, manage external access, than if you've got some sort of very large, sprawling, unorganized sites. Slightly sprawling answer there, but hopefully that covered it.
Good. Like you said, we're going to have upcoming webinars on Copilot because we can cover so much of this. I've got a question. What exactly is NCE you mentioned, which I can quickly cover? So NCE stands for the New Commerce Experience. So it's the new licensing model that Microsoft are introducing. So that became available from the 1st of March for charities, and charities have until the 1st of July to transition to NCE licensing. Essentially, it just means that you now have to choose your term commitments. So whether you want to go to a monthly commitment or an annual commitment. If you choose annual commitment, you have kind of a 20% discount. But you are kind of fixing your baseline licensing levels, and the monthly commitment means that you can up and down your kind of licensing levels, but that does come at that kind of 20% premium. So it's an important one to consider, and especially before the 1st of July, because when it comes to renewals, you'll then be moved on to NCE. I think that's it for questions. There was one that I just wanted to quickly round off with, which is, what feature do you both think is the most commonly underutilized but has the most value?
I'll go first. Good question, Lise. So for me, it's going to be Intune. Device management is often underlooked. Device is often looked at as something just to use to access other things. But making sure you get that provisioning process really well, especially in today's job market, it's difficult to hire people. You want to make sure that their first day goes as smoothly as possible. And the last thing you want is them to spend the first day constantly going back and forth from IT because their machine's not ready or it's got some kind of issue. And then also just going forward, right? If you need to push a new application to any of your devices, need to push a new policy. Again, the last thing you want is a legacy solution using VPNs and group policy, because you don't want to have to push out a group policy and then nag everyone to connect to the VPN to make sure they get that new policy. And then lastly, there's also the security elements. So using device compliance can help protect against some of the really advanced threats going on at the moment, things like adversary in the middle attacks and stuff like that. So that would be get my vote, I would say.
I'd have to say SharePoint, and not just because I've built much of my career on it. It's basically it's a core part of every Microsoft 365 subscription. You've always got SharePoint as part of your subscription, and a lot of people just aren't using it. People are still using on-premises file shares. It's a really robust content management platform with some really decent capabilities in there. It'd be crazy not to use it.
Amazing, thanks both. Just conscious of time, thanks everyone for all the great questions as well. As I said, I'm going to be sharing a recording to this video and also the slides that we've shared to everybody. If you have any questions or you didn't get any answered, feel free to just reply to that email and I can send them off to the relevant person to get a response for you. Thank you very much for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.